Hello everyone, welcome to UiPath tutorials. In this session, we are going to learn about pivot table and also we learn how to create pivot table using UiPath Studio and what are the limitations of creating a pivot table in UiPath, and finally we'll see about the refresh pivot table in UiPath. First of all, we'll see what is pivot table. Pivot table is a summarization of tool that is used for the data processing. Pivot tables are used to summarize, sort, reorganize, group, count, and average of data stored in a database. Now, we are already in Excel. Now, let me show you how we are going to create a pivot table in Excel. If you see, I am having a table over here. I want to summarize the data on this data. That is, we are having products information, that is different items that we have, right? How can I go ahead and create a pivot table? First of all, we'll go to insert and then you can see there's an option of pivot table. So click on pivot table. You can see choose the data that you want to analyze. As I said, this pivot table is used for the analyzing reorganization of the purpose. So I'm going to select a table or the range. So if you see right now, I don't have any tables. If I want to go ahead and use the table, we have already seen how to create a table. That table we can go ahead and we can use it. Or else we can go ahead and we can use the range which we have selected just right now. And also, once you have selected the table, you can go ahead and you can do that. Choose where you want to put the pivot report to be placed in the new worksheet or the existing worksheet. I will go ahead in the existing worksheet that is in the same sheet. Now I'm going to select it and then I'm going to click somewhere where I have to create this pivot table. Let me show you that. I'm going to select somewhere, right? Then automatically the sheet and you can see L3 that is going to be selecting over here and then clicking on OK. Now this is the pivot table with the name of, you can see over here pivot table name, that is pivot table 1 has been created, and then you can see on the right hand side what are the fields that we have. Let's assume I want item and total. You can see over here the row labels are going to be filtered out and then some of the values are coming. If you want based on the region, you can see the row label has been changed and then based on the values you can go ahead and you can report the filters, summarize, you can summarize and you can sort it out by changing the position. You can see drag and drop fields between the areas. So if you want to drag and drop in between the areas so that you will get the, over here you can see different areas has been moved out, and then I'm going to select into the region or different regions. You can get all these kind of things sorting in the pivot table. Okay, this is how we are going to do creating a pivot table in Excel. But how can we go ahead and do that in UiPath? But all these features are not, right now available in UiPath. Like that, we can go ahead and we can create a pivot table only by using both the table as well as the range. I mean to say, whatever the pivot table you want to create in the UiPath, first of all, you need to create a table and then just you can go ahead and you can create the skeleton only. You can't go ahead and you can create the fields and all these things. Okay, fine. Let me go ahead. Let me do that first of all. Let me switch to UiPath Studio. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new sequence. Add sequence. I'm going to give the name as pivot table. And then I'm going to click on create. Now what I'm going to do as a first activity, first of all, we'll see the where we will find the pivot table. When I'm searching for the, okay, let me go to activities and then I'm going to search it for pivot table. You can see app integration. Under app integration Excel, under Excel you will find table. Under table we are having create pivot table and refresh pivot table. So we are going to use these two pivot tables in this session, or we are going to learn about these two pivot table activities in this session. Okay, to use this pivot table, that is create pivot table, first of all we need the activity, that is Excel application scope. First of all, let's drag and drop Excel application scope onto the panel. And then I'm going to browse for the file. And then I'm going to select the products. and then open. Now let me drag and drop create pivot table onto the panel. First of all, we'll see the properties. What are the properties that what we have? If you see the input, that is first thing is the sheet name. Which sheet of Excel you have selected, which sheet you are going to be taking as an input. And the source table. Source table is nothing but here is the thing of the source table which you have been created in the create table. So as I told you, in Excel we are having directly we can take the range or else we can take the table, but UiPath only taking the table. Okay, you have to first create the table and then only you can go ahead and you can do any kind of modifications. Okay, now that is the source table name, and then you can see over here range. Range is nothing but over here the destination, it is the output. The output where you want to store or where you want to create the pivot table, right? If you see in my Excel where I have created this table at L3, right? That is the cell which we are going to select. Right? Let's assume if I want to create a pivot table at particular thing, then I can go ahead and select this cell that is L13 or something. Okay, that is the cell which you have to give the output related. Okay, that is L3. Now the table name, if you see the table name is nothing but the output of the pivot table. If you see when I have selected this pivot table, what is the name that we got the pivot table name? That is pivot 1 table 1, right? That is the same kind of name I have to give it over here. You can give any kind of table name over here. I will say product pivot table. Okay, now let me go ahead, let me save that. Now okay, the source table I have not given because of I have to show you where we can find this create table. As I said, I have to first create a table, then only I can go ahead and do this this create pivot table activity. So for that one, what I'm going to do, I will do manually from here. I'm going to click on create. I'm going to give the name. Okay, some name I will take it. Now, if you see the table name, I will say as product details. And then click on enter. I'm going to copy this details of the table name. And then I'm going to use the source table name over here. What will happen if I don't use this source table? Obviously it is expecting this is the mandatory field, mandatory property it is expecting, so we need to give this source table, or else what will happen, it will throw us an error. These are the limitations which we have. One thing is that you must and should has to give the source table name. That is, if you are not going to be creating, it won't allow you to to create a pivot table. And after that, by using this create pivot table, you can't get these kind of fields at all. Only you will find the structure, only the pivot table it is going to be creating. I will show you what are the things. Let me change all these things. Let me roll back these changes. I have rolled back all my changes in Excel. I'm going to copy the sheet name I have already copied, right? Okay, the sheet name I'm going to keep it as sheet 2, and then I'm going to save it. Okay, now let me go ahead, let me run the bot. Now you can see the pivot table has been created in the Excel, that is prod pivot table, but you can't see any kind of data has been filtered, all these things that as of now we need to do manually. Okay, so for that, this create pivot table, by the time when I'm going to create this, that we are going to get it this table member not found. This is not an issue, but still this kind of issues is going to taken care by the UiPath. Okay, UiPath is going to be working on these issues, and then it will it will comes with an updates. Okay, fine. Now let me go ahead. Let me stop the bot. I hope you understand how to create the pivot table. Now we will learn about the refresh pivot table. What is the necessity of the refresh pivot table? Let's assume if I got some data into this, some data has been modified. If you see the number of units that I have given as 100, and you can see the data I'm going to modify over here as some 10,000. Okay, now if you see, when I'm going to click on refresh, it will automatically changes the data, and then the grand total will changes. Let me show you once again over here. Now if you see 28461, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it as some zeros I'm going to add, and then I'm going to click on refresh. Now can you see the amount, whatever the data I'm going to inserting, it is going to be refreshing this pivot table when I'm going to click refresh pivot table. How can I go ahead and do that? Let me change this. Now I'm going to keep it the same pivot table. I can see the value over here, but I have not refreshed this. Now how can I go ahead and do that? By using refresh pivot table. First of all, let me disable this activity, and then let me go to app integration. In Excel, under table, you will find refresh pivot table. Let me drag and drop this refresh pivot table activity onto the panel. First of all, we'll see the properties. The first property is the sheet name, that which sheet that we have to select, that I can give a sheet to, and the table name, the pivot table name. As I already told you, where we can find this pivot table name, under options, that you will find the which one we have been created, that is product pivot table, right? That has been, you can see over here, this is the same pivot table which we have given, right? Now let me go ahead, we will enter that pivot table which we have been created. Now let me save it. Now let me run the bot. Now if you closely observe this location, okay, that the value is going to be changing over here. I hope you understand the value has been changed over here, right? That is by using refresh pivot table. So the limitations of the pivot table is that first thing, we can create only pivot table, but we can't enter any kind of team members over there. And after that, we have to use create table mandatory. Without going to create table, we can't go ahead and do that. We can't proceed with the create pivot table activity. And there's a lot of features are upcoming on this pivot table that the UiPath is working on that one. I hope you understand how to use create pivot table and refresh pivot table in this session. Thank you for watching UiPath tutorials. If you have any queries related to this concept, please post them in the comment section. I will see you in the next session. Till then, bye bye. Have a nice day.